what I'm going to share with you today and what we're going to explore together is 3 potential phases for Reiki practice, treatment practice. So giving Reiki to other people through our hands-on treatment mainly. Now, the source of these, the description of these 3 phases is a series of conferences that took place back in the early 2000s. So the first one was 2001, then there was another in 2002. Those 2 were in the USA. And then in 2003, there was one in the UK, organized by the Reiki Association. So at these 3 conferences, groups of Reiki practitioners, masters and non-masters, explored what it means to be a Reiki practitioner. And we came up with this description of 3 potential phases. And that's what I'm going to share with you, going into more detail of these 3 phases of Reiki practice, which I hope you will resonate with. Some of it you may not so much, because you may not have yet reached that phase of practice. But hopefully we will all be resonating with the beginning, the first phase anyway. Originally, they were called 3 levels of practice. And for me, that was a little bit, it didn't quite give the right description, that giving the impression that you leave one level to go to the next one. When in fact, what's more true for me, and in a lot of other Reiki practitioners' experience, I think, is that it's more like an expansion of our practice. So I came across a description of what it means to go through phases of development. And this resonated much more with me. So I've changed the title from levels of practice to phases of practice. So what I mean by phases is that it's about developing. So you may have your original practice, but you add skills, you add capabilities on top of what you've already learned. So for example, when I was young, I learned to play the violin. And I started out learning very basically, where to put my fingers on the fingerboard, how to move the bow, and I had to do scales and very simple tunes in order to learn. And gradually I got more proficient at those. So I moved on to the next phase, which was to play more complicated tunes and with more complicated bowing. So in the first phase, I just had my hand in what's called the first position, so only one place on the fingerboard. And as I went into the next phase, I learned how to move my finger up the fingerboard and do what we call second position, and so on, a third position. So, but even though I was moving into second and third positions, I was still doing first position, and I was still doing the same scales, and I was still doing the same practice of bowing. I was getting better at it, but it was still the same. It was there. The basic fundamental practice was still there. And then gradually I went on to playing much more complicated tunes, double stopping, which is where the bow's on 2 strings at once, and playing much faster, and so on and so forth. So that was the third phase. So I hope that makes sense of the potential of moving through these different phases, but we don't leave behind those essential qualities of the fundamental practice. That's always underpinning, if you like, the expansion that we go through to the next levels. So, as I said, this description came from conferences organized by Phyllis Furamoto and Paul Mitchell, but it included Reiki masters and students from different countries, different stages of their practice. So it was a real melting pot of ideas, which I found very nourishing, actually, very enriching. And I'd like to just share with you, talking again about this aspect of phases. There is I'm just going to screen share with you. So as I said, developed at the conferences in the USA and UK between 2001 and 2003. I also had a conversation with Phyllis Remoto in 2015 where we updated things a little bit more. So in regenerative thinking, there is this concept of nestedness, where we have ourselves, an immediate circle of influence, and a wider circle of influence. And in these three phases, I see a similar kind of nestedness, if you like. So you start in the center and you gradually expand and move out. So the three phases are known as folk art, public practice, and professional practice. So we all begin in the folk art. We may or may not move into public practice, and we may or may not move into professional practice. It just depends on what we decide, what are the nature of our Reiki practice, and how we wish to go forwards. So let's go straight on then, and I'll introduce you to the folk art. So our first phase in Reiki practice is known as the folk art, or informal practice. So the term folk art was chosen referring to the way that sometimes we practice an art at home. We can be very proficient in it. I'm reading a book actually at the moment by a journalist who draws. He draws and he paints. And he, I think, would regard himself as a folk artist, in that he doesn't ever regard his drawings and paintings as being something that you would necessarily share with the wider world, although one or two might be. But it's more something that he does for himself. So in the folk art of Reiki, the circle of relationship in the context of treatments is ourselves, because we self-treat, the person being treated, our master, and peers, other Reiki students. In other words, our practice is within the immediate circle of influence. So just referring back to this first picture about, so here we are, this is the self and the immediate circle of influence. Self-treatment is practiced. Treatments are received, so we receive Reiki treatments from other people. There's no obligation, so we can just do it or not do it, whether we wish to or not. We can choose. And that's the same for giving treatments to somebody else. You know, we can decide whether we want to do it or not. You know, we can arrange a treatment and then go, actually, I'm sorry, I can't do the treatment because something's come up. We're free to do that. And treatments occur as they fit into life. So, you know, we might be working Monday to Friday, so we may do our Reiki treatments at the weekends because that's when we have more time, or in the evenings, or you know, sometimes we're too busy, or we don't do them at all. So they fit into life as you know, as and when. Exchange is a process of discovery. Students may want to ask for money but not know how. A process of discovery is entered into in exploring this. There is some knowledge of ethics, which is a simple understanding that there are ethical issues in giving Reiki. So we're not bound by ethics necessarily, we're just aware of them, and you know, we act as ethically as we do in our normal lives, hopefully. Reiki practice is not easily articulated. The person giving the treatment does not necessarily need to express what the treatment is, what they're offering, or what will happen, because, you know, it's just, oh, you've got a pain, let me try Reiki. It's as simple as that. There's no advertising. Advertising is actually not a good idea at this stage of your practice, because it brings other responsibilities and liabilities potentially. So much more this is happening by word of mouth, and you know, it just happens organically. The objectives are to gain experience, learn how to read your hands, and gain confidence in Reiki itself. And then there's this quality of sharing the wonder of Reiki. So wanting to share the wonderful thing that's Reiki. I recently heard about somebody who was a very new Reiki student and approached a hospital about being able to offer Reiki in the hospital. Now, as a new Reiki student, this person is probably not really well prepared to do that work. However, I can really understand them wanting to share the wonder of Reiki and, you know, and understand their enthusiasm, especially in the first 3 months. We can be so, you know, we just want to share about it. Reiki is so amazing. I don't know if you can all remember that phase in your experience. And what I want to emphasize is that it's not that this is a lesser form of practice. It's somewhere that we're all rooted, and that even a professional practitioner will come back to this, where everything is much more free and easy and informal, and, you know, and so on. So this is our foundation. It's like the scales on the violin. Or the drawing practice. I once saw an exhibition actually of Picasso's drawings. Oh boy, could he draw. You could really tell how much he'd practiced. And that's the foundation of our Reiki, you know, public professional practice, is day in, day out self-treatment, receiving treatment, sharing the wonder, giving treatments to others, just, you know, as and when. We always have that potential. So then we move into public practice. Our circle of relationship is the same as before. So ourselves, we're still giving ourselves, treating ourselves, the person being treated. We have a relationship with our master, hopefully, and with our peers, with the addition in this phase of the public, members of the public that we're now giving Reiki to. A characteristic is that we're still practicing self-treatment, of course, and the practitioner is sure to receive treatment for themselves from another Reiki practitioner, so that the practitioner's personal process doesn't become part of the client's process. So what this means is that it's important that we take responsibility for our own mental health, if you like, so that we're not leaking anything onto the client when we're giving the sessions to them. In public practice, we become more regularly available. So we might have a particular day of the week that we say, you know, this is the day I do Reiki sessions for people. And treatments can still occur anywhere. So they might occur, then you might be doing treatments in your home, you might be doing it at a clinic, you might be going to other people's homes. There's all the different options of where the treatment practice can take place. There's a clear fee schedule with fees determined by the practitioner individually. It could include an experience exchange. So in other words, you might give a Reiki treatment and somebody else might give you aromatherapy or reflexology or counseling or whatever. There may be an exchange like that, so that you get to experience other practices, other therapies. But you also have, you know, you decide on a fee and you ask for that. There's a commitment to ethics, becoming clearer about ethical issues and consequences. So as we start to work with the public, it's really important that we know what the ethical issues are, and we're taking more responsibility for ensuring that those ethics are maintained, and that we recognize there are consequences if we don't. Treatments need to have a more structured articulation. We need to be able to explain what will happen in the treatment and what is being offered. So we need to know what to say a little bit and what not to say as well. Certainly in the UK, there are certain things that it's important to not say, as well as what you are going to say. So you need to be able to explain Reiki a little bit more. Certainly I know that this is something that many practitioners in the early stages of their practice find quite difficult, to how they're going to explain the Reiki treatment, how they're going to explain. And a lot of people get caught in the idea of that they have to explain what Reiki is, when actually what needs, rather, it's more about explaining how the Reiki treatment will be for that person that is going to receive it. But you need to be able to explain what's going to happen, what likely outcomes there are, that kind of thing. Public practice is announced with intention, also possibly by printed media, by having a card or a leaflet, for example. But advertising is mainly by word of mouth and personal contact. That's always going to be the best way anyway. And in this level of practice, it reduces the risk of liability. You're less likely to have a problem with somebody that you know, a friend knows, or a friend of a friend knows. So there's that kind of connection. And if you've been recommended to somebody and they come to you, again, it's much less likely you're going to have any difficulties with of the liability kind. Share the wonder. We still want to share the wonder of Reiki, just like Carolyn did just now. But it gets a little bit more difficult with this level of practice, because it's less easy to talk to the public about the magic of Reiki. If it's people we don't know, or don't know so well, how do we explain that magic? Although I think Carolyn did a very good job just now in telling her story. So that's public practice. I think it's time to move on to professional practice. Now, this is a little preamble to this. When we were first exploring these different phases, I and quite a lot of the participants actually thought there were only two phases. You either treat in the public or you weren't. So it was either focal or public practice. Now, at that time, I would say the next phase didn't really exist that much in the Reiki world. This is back in 2001 when we first started this description, really. However, there were members of the group who were professionals in other fields, like nurses or other therapists, and they saw the potential for Reiki as a profession. And what characteristics that would have, which were over and above what is described in the public practice phase. And I was actually kind of going, oh no, it's just, you either treat in the public or you're not. But actually, I began to listen and listen and watched as these characteristics were developed and described. And I'm now really grateful that we did listen and take those ideas on board, because what we have now is this fantastic description of what it means to be a professional Reiki practitioner, and it is different. There are different responsibilities, there are different qualities, and it really does, I think, have the potential to open doors for Reiki. We were saying that we'd love everybody to know about Reiki. Well, more people will know about Reiki when there's more Reiki available. And more Reiki available means alongside conventional healthcare, in my view. So there's quite a movement in the UK, and I think around the world, for integrative healthcare, where complementary therapies are used alongside conventional medicine. I think it's in America, it's possibly even more advanced in some ways than in the UK. In the UK, because of our National Health Service, because of the free at source health service, and complementary medicine needing to be paid for generally, there is a little bit more of a challenge, I would say, in how to integrate. But it's happening already. It is happening. And this is something I feel very passionate about. And in order to be taken seriously as professional practitioners, we really do need to think about what qualities are expected of a professional. And that's where this description has been really helpful. So let's have a look at it. So the third phase, professional practice. And we decided that there is a criteria that you need to have a minimum of second degree initiation, Reiki 2. Now, it's possible, we agreed that you could definitely practice the folk art with only Reiki 1. You might be able to practice publicly, treating members of the public with Reiki 1. This was based on one of the Reiki masters, I think, in the group had been to Hawaii, where Takata taught, and looked for some of her students. And she found some, and some of them were first degree students. And they'd been first degree students for 20 years. And they said, I might be nearly ready for second degree. And they were treating, a wider circle than just their family and friends. And they were fantastic practitioners. They had, they lived and breathed Reiki like Takata taught them. But we did feel that for professional practice, you needed to have all the tools of the toolbox, basically, for treatment. So second degree. So you have the second degree symbols. So that's why there's that criteria. Now, the circle of relationship is as before: yourself, the person being treated, your master, your peers, and the public, with the addition of other professionals. So there will be interaction with other professionals, such as other complementary therapists, doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, and so on, other healthcare professionals. As before, of course, one of the foundations, self-treatment is practiced. And the practitioner is sure to receive treatment. Again, to ensure that the practitioner's personal process doesn't impact on the person that they're treating. So it becomes even more important, this aspect of self-care, that we don't just take our own responsibility for it, but that we get help, essentially, that we receive treatment from others. It might be that it's other treatment than Reiki as well, whatever we need for our fitness to practice. We are available to provide a course of healing, following through treatments, encouraging the client to be committed to healing. So people are coming for a series of treatments rather than just one, and we're available to provide this. So in our folk art, it's very often, ad hoc, one and, one or two treatments, maybe. Even in public practice, we may well be kind of, maybe just a few treatments. We don't necessarily see the process of the course of healing that we need to have some sense of as professionals. I think this is a really interesting quality that at the time we described it, I had no idea really what this meant, I think. I've had lots of experience now giving Reiki treatments in this way, where I ask people to commit to a series of Reiki treatments, and seeing the difference in people's process, and the recognition of my commitment and their commitment, that makes a difference to the outcome. And the healing process, I think, is really interesting. and it is about us as practitioners being available for that. So it's a different level of commitment for us as practitioners. Treatments occur in an environment specific to the practice of Reiki. In other words, are given in a room specifically dedicated to giving treatments. Now, this might be a hospital. It might be a hospice. It might be a clinic room. I was at a hospital last night, actually, and they were saying that post-COVID, they're actually preparing to use a room for complementary therapies in the hospital to support cancer patients who are going through radiotherapy treatment. So that was a really exciting. So that would be a professional, treatment space, perhaps shared with other practitioners. It may not be yours exclusively, but if you are in your own practice, you would have a room that you dedicate to Reiki treatments. So I have a room in my garden, for example, and it's my Reiki room. There's an equitable exchange of money, that is, that covers overhead expenses and other expenses. So charging what it really costs. Reiki is an integral part of one's livelihood, so it provides daily financial support. In other words, we're making the money that we receive for Reiki, making sure that it actually does cover the costs of being a practitioner. So things like insurance and renting a room, if that's what we need to do, the laundry, advertising, all of these things need to be covered in the fees that we charge. And it also provides something for us to live on because we're committing the time. So we need to be supported to live. So that may mean a different kind of fee than what we might charge in the public practice, where we don't necessarily need to cover all these different costs. There's a higher commitment to ethics from a greater understanding of the issues and risks involved, and also more defined by society at this stage. So in the UK, for example, we have the Complementary and Natural Healthcare Council, which holds a register for various complementary therapies, including Reiki. And they have a code of ethics, code of practice ethics, and I can't remember what the title of it is just now, sorry. But basically it's a code of ethics and practice. And so they therefore are showing us what the expectation of practitioners on the register is. So that is a perfect example of how these ethics are defined by society. So, other than the Reiki community at this stage. A practitioner in professional practice is able to clearly articulate what is being offered. So we mentioned earlier that it can be quite difficult to say what you're offering, and the after effects of Reiki, if you like, is also part of this that we were talking about earlier. So by the time you're a professional practitioner, you're able to really clearly talk about these things. Marketing of the service offered, including doing market research to identify potential clients. So a much more engaged and outward-looking, engagement with the world, if you like, in letting them know that you're available to offer Reiki sessions. General advertising leading to more risk. So if you put an advert in the newspaper, for example, that's very general advertising. You have no idea who is reading that. If you put an advert on Facebook, very often you have no idea who that's going to reach. Facebook promises it's going to reach, thousands of people, so many thousand people who the kind that you're looking, but you have no idea who they are. You have no idea. And that leads to more potential risk. An example of this is one of my friends I think she put something in the newspaper, and she had two men who contacted her. And both of them she felt uncomfortable with. And she realized that they were clients who'd found her through this kind of advertising, where there was no personal contact, no personal connection. In fact, she didn't proceed with the treatment. She refused to treat them, which was sensible, because she didn't feel that they were looking for what she was actually offering. They were looking for something else. And I have another friend who put a little advert in her newsagent's window, and she had a man who arrived and took off his clothes. And she said, "You don't have to take your clothes off for Reiki." And he said, "Oh, I'm more comfortable like this." And she said, so she just, she got him to lie on the couch and put her hands on and said, "Reiki, Reiki, please help." And he went to sleep, and he slept through the whole treatment. But he was really shocked that's what happened, and he had expected some very different service. And once she'd finished, he grabbed his clothes, got dressed, paid her, and ran. So, but she went straight down to the newsagents and took out the little card in the window. That's the kind of thing you have to be aware of when you're advertising more generally. It's also people you don't know. Well, I think there's another bit actually coming up about this. Sharing the wonder. As before, it's more difficult to talk to people about the magic of Reiki when you have no connection. with the person who, with the practitioner. You don't know what their world context is. You don't know what their spiritual beliefs are. It's much more difficult to share the wonder of what, we have our experience, we have our love of Reiki, and how you share that with someone who has a completely different worldview, and where do you start? But we still want to share that wonder. Having a referral base and network is important. So a knowledge of local practitioners doing similar complementary services, so that you can make a referral when something comes up that the practitioner is not equipped to, or chooses not to deal with. Practitioner has a responsibility to seek them out and also to make themselves known. So this is also another way of finding people to give Reiki to, is making connection with your local network of complementary therapists. And then hopefully you can refer to them and they can refer to you, because there's always something that someone else would be better at dealing with, probably. I know Reiki is great for everything, but and there are times when it may be beyond your capabilities. It may be someone you don't feel comfortable with. It may be that another treatment would work quicker, because Reiki can take time and they want a quicker outcome. Or you were saying about the ankle that you didn't feel you could treat. So Jessica, so that would be an example that you would refer them on to the doctor to just get it checked what's going on with that ankle. Professional practice is more defined by society, with set standards amongst other professionals, such as privacy, time, cleanliness, confidentiality, client-therapist boundaries, and the keeping of records. So these are things that a professional of any who's working with people is expected to abide by, if you like, to practice. For example, safeguarding is something that's very much in the public consciousness now. So it's expected that people have safeguarding policies, for example, in their organizations. So this is how society can define things, and that we need to recognize that that's the expectation that people have of us as professionals. In professional practice, we must be willing to risk liability. This refers back to the advertising, but generally, people who are not known to you may come for treatment and are statistically more likely to find fault with your treatment than a friend. So you have to be willing to risk liability in the way that teachers and doctors and so on do, other professionals. You're also more at risk when the person's not known to you of violent or abusive behavior from the client. Unfortunately, there are people out there who have malintentions, and they're much more likely to find you and turn up on your doorstep or clinic door if you're putting out more generalized advertising and you're making yourself available to a wider circle of the public. But a professional practitioner has more confidence through their own experience. So I think it's really important that people take time. This is why, for example, we in the Reiki Council, we have a minimum of 9 months to cover the core curriculum and the CNHC core curriculum, because practitioners need time to gain the experience and therefore build their confidence. Professional practitioners need to fulfill necessary business practices such as taxation, licensing in the US, for example, insurance. These are all things that, again, in any other profession, they would be something you'd expect. Further training is necessary, which is likely to be standardized. Now, this is an interesting one, because at the time this was created, there wasn't any further training after Reiki 1, Reiki 2, Reiki Master. That's it. That was it. That was all there was. Now there is the possibility of doing further training. There are courses that train people to go on after second degree, or during second degree, after second degree, to learn more about being a professional, or at least public practitioner. And in terms of standardization, these qualities that we're looking at exploring tonight actually have informed the creation of the National Occupational Standards for Reiki in the UK. And the core curriculum of the Reiki Council, which became the core curriculum of CNHC, all came from that. So these characteristics fed into the development of the NOS, which then fed into the development of the core curriculum. And those National Occupational Standards, they're standardized, they're standards. So those are the standards by which CNHC now measures practitioners who want to join their register. So while this characteristic didn't exist at the time, it was a vision, and it has come to pass, which is really, really lovely. Recognition as a professional by self and peers. So it's not just about saying, I'm a professional practitioner. It's also gaining that recognition from others in your profession. And this is again where, interestingly, the opening of the register with a complementary natural healthcare council has led to a way of being recognized as a professional practitioner. So in order to be on the CNHC register, practitioners need to meet these standards, the NOS level of practice, of standards, and to meet the core curriculum. And that is essentially a recognition by our peers, because it's our peers who'd say, yes, you've met this standard. So again, something that's evolved more recently. And of course, continuing education is required after initial training. Again, something that's very common in professions is you don't just stop learning when you've done your basic training, but you continue to learn, you continue to develop. And this became particularly an issue with doctors in the UK after there was an issue with a doctor who would basically, he'd done his training a long, long time ago and continued to practice in the same way. And this ended up causing problems for his patients. So some years ago, it became much more important and recognized that people need to keep up to date. And certainly there are changes in legislation, there are changes in expectations of us as practitioners. So it's important that we continue to learn, but also, quite apart from anything else, it's really good to continue to learn and develop ourselves as practitioners, so we don't just stay as we stuck in a rut, that we continue to develop and to learn and become better practitioners all the time. So there's a lot more to take in there, isn't there? Yeah. If you'd like to stay in touch with me, you can join my email mailing list, and I do a newsletter every month. And I do have a course that covers the becoming a professional practitioner, which is starting in October, and you can find out some information about that if you're interested. And if you would like to have some one-to-one tutorials, that's also something that I offer. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining me today. And thank you, Reiki.